Today, we will talk about women in the world of sports. Although today we perceive them as powerful and talented women, they were once greatly oppressed by men. Today, we will be talking about the journey of these women worldwide and on the UMD campus. Although it is commonly known that women have been oppressed throughout history, many do not understand why in sports specifically. 19th century America glorified the modesty of the white woman and discouraged them playing sports because they believed it could jeopardize their fertility. This idea is originated by Aristotle. He believed that women were practically ran by their reproductive systems. If a woman did something like study too much, ride a bicycle, or participate in, quote, unladylike sports, Aristotle believed that she would become infertile. While there are many excuses made to stunt social growth of women, this is likely one of the oldest excuses used to stunt the growth of women in athletics. In 1919, female UMD students made an athletic association where they played recreational games such as dodgeball, soccer, and baseball. UMD did not have an all-women's team until 1924, the university's women's rifling team. The team would play on campus and send the results to competing teams because they were not permitted to travel. In the world around this time, women were just beginning to compete in the Olympics in 1920, also the same year women were granted the right to vote. Also at this time, levels of racism in America were extremely high in the 1920s. There was extreme backlash or violence towards any facilities such as tennis courts or pools that allowed African Americans, female or male. African American women brought achievement to their community by defeating white teams at basketball games and track meets. In a UMD archive titled Confidential Expressions About Discrimination Existing for Women Students in the Area of Athletics and Physical Education, it lists many differences between the men and women's athletics department, such as women having inferior equipment, older and way less equipment, inferior or older facilities, having no practice uniforms, and having no health services for women athletes, even though male athletes did. The next archive was a worksheet found at UMD titled The Women's Sports Action Manual. Its caption says, quote, "First, find out where you stand," and quote, 45 ways your school may be ripping you off. It includes a 45-item checklist for women to identify their school's, quote, sex discrimination score. Amid the end of the civil rights movement in the mid-1960s, the women's movement in sports was moving closer to men's athletics. In 1969, gymnastics and track and field were added to the list of national championships for women's sports. While they themselves were veering closer to equality in athletics, the National Organization for Women demanded that, quote, the right of women to be educated to their full potential equally with men should be secured by federal and state legislation. In 1972, Title IX was passed. The law says, no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any educational program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. While Title IX provides many benefits, it also provides female athletes the right to equal opportunity in sports and educational institutions, from elementary school students to college students. While Title IX may seem like the end-all be-all to inequality for women, certain issues continue to linger. Many agree that the women's liberation consisted mostly of an elitist organization made up of upper-middle-class white women with the concerns of that class and not paying much attention to the problems of most black women. So while this new initiative of women's equality was being implemented, white women supported this change especially because it catered more to them. While the intercollegiate athletics program after Title IX listed values and virtues of their new program, after researching through many of their documents, there was no mention of diversity of athletes in terms of ethnicity, only in terms of gender. Considering that majority of female athletes were white, you would think they would discuss diversity or ethnicity in their official documents, however they do not. In a different archive by a man named George H. Hanford, titled Synopsis of the Need for and Feasibility of a National Study of Intercollegiate Athletics, it actually mentions the lingering issue of ethnicity in athletics. He says, quote, Blacks are not recruited by post-secondary institutions unless their potential is far superior to that of whites. Hence, we are uneasy about the prominence of Black athletes and wish there were more. He goes further to explain disparities between coaching staff by saying, quote, "Coaching opportunities are not opening up as fast as could be expected for Blacks. Despite a long history of participation in competition, Blacks are either being ignored or denied staff roles in the coaching establishment. Similarly, the unequal position of women in post-secondary sports has resulted in a loss of opportunities for coaching jobs for women." This was in 1984, about 10 years after Title IX's passing. An example of another university on similar issues is at Penn State. In a newspaper archive from 1989 titled, quote, "Court Order Stirs Black Recruitment," a Black faculty member claims that Penn State practiced a sort of, quote, "benign neglect," neither consciously excluding nor actively trying to attract Blacks. The newspaper suggests many other universities also took this approach. University of Maryland also delayed in the same way. They did not actively have orientations or programs geared toward Black students that worked towards making Black students feel welcome until the early 1980s. Like this archive shows, there are recommendations for UMD to help ethnic minority issues, but this did not occur until about 10 years after Title IX. Next, we'll talk about theoretical paradigms. In A Black Feminist Statement, the Combahee River Collective says, "In our consciousness-raising sessions, for example, we have in many ways gone beyond white women's revelations because we are dealing with the implications of race and class as well as sex. No one before has ever examined the multi-layered texture of Black women's lives." They then say the sanctions in the Black and white communities against Black women thinkers is comparatively much higher than for white women, particularly ones from the educated middle and upper classes. This relates to Black women after Title IX because, unlike white women, the law did not solve all of their problems. They still continued to struggle with racial and other forms of prejudice. The belief that Title IX solved all issues of prejudice to women is a common ideal of white feminism. In third wave Black feminism, Kimberly Springer says, "If we consider the first wave as that moment of organizing encompassing women's suffrage and the second wave as the women's liberation/women's rights activism of the late 1960s, we effectively disregard the race-based movements before them that served as precursors or windows of political opportunity for gender activism." She then says, "There is a need for Black women to work separately from white feminists because of racism experienced personally, political betrayals, and the strategic need for separatism." Springer demonstrates that it is dangerous to disregard all of the previous movements and precursors experienced by a culture just because a step has been made in favor of that social group. Similarly to Title IX, just because a step has been made in women's favor, it does not wipe clean the struggles that Black women have faced and continue to face. This is why Springer believes Black women should work separately from white feminists due to the large distinctions between groups in their goals and struggles that they face. Both theorists are examples of intersectional feminism because it takes into account the many different ways that each woman experiences discrimination. Both of these theorists strive to interconnect race, gender, and class as they apply to a particular individual or group. This allows women of all races, religions, identities, and economic classes to have their voices heard. Next, we will talk about the reflection. While it took minorities longer to gain the same level of equality as white students, Title IX launched the policy change to benefit male students, female students, and the faculty of all schools in the United States. While many believe Title IX only affects female students, it also benefits male students. Male participation in sports also skyrocketed after Title IX, and Title IX also protects them from all of the same things as women, including sexual assault. Title IX also applies to faculty in that it protects faculty from sex or gender discrimination from students or from other faculty. It helps all students and faculty in terms of handling sexual misconduct, prohibits schools from retaliating against a victim filing a complaint, protects pregnant and parenting students, and more. University of Maryland's mission statement says that, quote, "The diversity of its community is among its greatest strengths." The mission statement also says that UMD provides equal educational opportunity. While many believe that all diverse students are equal to white students because of laws such as Title IX, it is arguable that many students still experience racial prejudice. Depending on your personal view, you may agree that the mission statement is true. However, we can all agree that for a long period of time, the University of Maryland did not appreciate diversity and did not offer equal educational opportunity to all students. My overall assessment is that while all students may be legally equal, we must always take into account the different experiences, pasts, and beliefs of others, even if they are not the same as us. White women are especially vulnerable to adhering to white feminism, which only focuses on the struggles of white women without addressing other forms of oppression faced by ethnic minority women and other women who lack privileges. While Title IX was still a step for humanity, it did not end suffering to all, and it is important not to celebrate it without acknowledging that it did not affect all women the same. While Title IX gave women rights in things such as sports, it is still extremely important to look at the negatives, such as how it did not grant all of the same benefits to Black women.